going to call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone to the TBARTA April 25th board meeting. We're at Hart headquarters here. It's 9:30. Richard, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jennifer, please call the roll.
Jim Fulton.
Here.
Melanie Griffin.
On the phone.
Oh. Cliff Manuel.
Present.
Commissioner John Minton.
Present.
Commissioner Pat Kemp.
Here.
Commissioner Reggie Bellamy. Commissioner Catherine Starkey. Commissioner Karen Seal.
Present? Just in the nick of time.
Rich McLean.
Here.
Commissioner Janet Long.
Here.
Mayor Kreisman.
Here.
And Mayor Buckhorn is excused. Secretary David Gwynn.
Here.
And Secretary Nandum.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. First order of business is public comment. I haven't received any cards. Why don't you give the public announcement and see if anyone wants to turn in the card late or
Does
talk.
anybody have any public comments today that they would like to present? Okay. Chair, we do not have any public comments.
Okay, well, I will say public comment is closed, then thank you. Next item of business is recognition of former board members. And Betsy Bedak, welcome today. We are happy to have you again with us. David is going to read a proclamation for you and our gratitude for your years of service to TBARTA.
Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Authority Resolution Number 2019-02, a resolution of appreciation for the service of Betsy Benak. Whereas the Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Authority was created by the Florida Legislature to plan, finance, construct, operate, maintain, and manage multimodal systems in Hernando, Hillsborough, Manatee, Pasco, and Pinellas counties. And whereas Betsy Benak was appointed by the Manatee County Board of County Commissioners to represent Manatee County as one of the members of the TBARTA Governing Board, a position in which she had served with distinction and dedication. And whereas, as a result of the respect she earned from the members of the TBARTA Governing Board, Betsy Benak was elected to serve as treasurer of the board from 2013 to 2018, as well as chair of the Finance Committee. She also served as both a legislative subcommittee member and ad hoc executive director search committee member. During her tenure, she actively participated in framing the goals, direction, and programs of TBARTA. And whereas, while always championing issues of importance to Manatee County, Betsy Benak has exemplified the spirit of regionalism by lending her support to improving transportation and mobility throughout the 5 counties served by TBARTA, and in return, received the support of TBARTA in addressing those same issues in Manatee County. And now, therefore, be it resolved by the Governing Board that the TBARTA Governing Board hereby expresses its sincere appreciation to Betsy Benak for her service representing Manatee County, and further, the TBARTA Governing Board directs that this resolution be presented to Betsy Benak in public session at the board meeting on April 26, 2019, in recognition and acknowledgement of her dedicated and valuable service to the Tampa Bay region. Approved and adopted by the Governing Board of TBARTA on this 26th day of April 2019. For the board, signed Jim Holton, Chairman.
Thank you, Betsy, for your service. Please say a few words and tell us what you're doing, and as if we don't know, but all good things in Manatee County.
I still am a county commissioner in Manatee County, for those of you who might have wondered. I am really pleased that we have a new appointee to TBARTA, Reggie Bellamy. I think he's going to do a great job for you. He's somebody who's very, very concerned about transit and how it affects not only his community, but our entire region. So I think he's the right person for the job. He really wanted it, and I thought, well, I've served for a long time, so I'm glad to give the opportunity to someone else. But I can't say, I do miss you guys a little bit. I don't miss the drive so much sometimes, but it wasn't too bad this morning. But you guys have your work cut out for you. I've always said it as a member, and it's still true, regional government is not easy. to operate, but it is so necessary when it comes to something like transportation goals. And I know you guys are on it. I feel really good about the legislature that we have in place. You know, we're really glad that Bill Galvano is heading up the Senate, and he's got some great ideas. So I'll be following you. I'll be watching you, see what you do. It's very, very important for our community. So thank you for this recognition, and thank you for the work that you do. Good luck.
Thank you for your service.
Chairman, can I say something?
You're right over here, Brian.
What's that? Yeah, Chair recognizes Karen Seal.
Yes, Betsy, I just wanted to commend your service, and you brought such a regional perspective and really helped us to advance to where we are today. You really wore that regional hat, and I thank you very much for all of your service.
The Chair recognizes David Green again to present the award to Kathleen Shanahan. And Kathleen, welcome.
Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Authority, Resolution Number 2019-04, a resolution of appreciation for the service of Kathleen Shanahan. Whereas the Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Authority was created by the Florida Legislature to plan, finance, construct, operate, maintain, and manage multimodal systems in Hernando, Hillsborough, Manatee, Pasco, and Pinellas counties. And whereas Kathleen Shanahan was appointed by the Hillsborough Area Regional Transit Authority to represent HART as one of the members of the TBARTA Governing Board. And whereas Kathleen Shanahan served with distinction and dedication as a member of the TBARTA Governing Board, as well as both the Finance and Legislative Committees. She also served on the Ad Hoc Executive Director Search Committee. And whereas, while always championing issues of importance to HART, Kathleen Shanahan has exemplified the spirit of regionalism by lending her support to improving transportation and mobility throughout the 5 counties served by TBARTA, and in return, received the support of TBARTA in addressing those same issues for HART and Hillsborough County. And now, therefore, be it resolved by the Governing Board that the TBARTA Governing Board hereby expresses its sincere appreciation to Kathleen Shanahan for her service representing HART, and further, the TBARTA Governing Board directs that this resolution be presented to Kathleen Shanahan in public session at the board meeting on April 26, 2019, in recognition and acknowledgement of her dedicated and valuable service to the Tampa Bay region. Approved and adopted by the Governing Board of TBARTA on this 26th day of April 2019. For the board, signed Jim Holton, Chairman.
Thank you so much for your service to this board and to this state and community. I'd like you to say a few words, tell us what you're going to be doing now. A lot of things, I understand, good things.
Well, I'm still actively running a private sector business both in Florida and in the Northeast, which we have a footprint nationally. I just think you really need to stay focused on this regional focus. I did economic development in California, and the only way that we turned California around, this was about 15, 20 years ago, was on a regional leverage. And it's all about the ability to stay, you have your local constituencies and your local other vehicles that are supposed to take care of the local priorities. But if this is the first time that I think TBARTA's got some credibility, frankly, understanding this from the statewide level where I've served before. And I think you're building on that, and I think you got to stay really focused on using the leverage of the legislative leadership that we have coming up, that's aware of the transportation issues, wants to be part of the solution, and give them projects that work for the region. Because it really is all about, from this board's perspective, finding effective projects that are going to mobilize people in this region. And I just would encourage you to stay on path. I think you've come a long way. I felt like I was here for an inflection point of focus between the PSTA partnership on the finance, Janet's leadership on the really being dogged on getting those things transparent and out in the open. So we knew what we had and we knew what we didn't have and we knew what we needed to go get. And I think that's the one thing that I feel like, and selecting, the new executive director, David, I'm really excited about all of the movements that I was part of and appreciate this beyond what you guys know. So thank you for recognizing it, and it was fun.
Thank you so much for those comments, and again, thank you for your immense service to this board.
Chairman?
Yes.
I also want to thank Kathleen as well. You brought such a great business perspective and really helped us to move forward on a regional project that we're doing the first phase today, per se. And so thank you very much for your leadership and service.
Yes, Chair recognizes Commissioner Long.
Kathleen, I just really want to share with you that the governor has yet to make his appointments to TBARTA, and it's a great opportunity to come back. And I hope you do.
Thank you for those comments. Any other comments? Thank you both again for your years of service. Appreciate it. And you guys really typify what TBARTA is all about, and that is the spirit of regionalism. All of us coming together for a higher good here. Of course, local priorities are local priorities, but they're regional priorities, state and national priorities, and I think you two have illustrated how important those are to the state and this nation. Thanks again for your service. Next item is consent agenda items. The only thing is the approval of the prior minutes. Are there any changes or corrections?
Move approval.
Second.
And a motion, a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes pass. Next item is number 6. The first item up is the MPO Regional Coordination and Best Practices Final Report. The chair recognizes who's doing. Scott?
It'll be Scott doing it on the phone.
Okay.
Hello.
Morning, Scott.
Can everybody? Morning. Everybody hear me okay?
I think we can hear you fine.
Okay, just checking in. Thank you. Thank you for your time. I'm sorry I couldn't come back and be there person to person with you here at the end, but what I and Jeff Kramer are going to try to do is walk you through the final document and study recommendations that came from this. And the next slide, Jeff, is just talking about the one you've seen before, probably the project objectives and project overview. So when we were brought on board, Jeff Kramer with Cutter and myself at Stantec, our mission was to examine some existing conditions that were participating in a good way with regionalism, and then some of the barriers, and then identify some ways, both internal ideas as well as external ideas from other states and regions about how maybe to address those issues. So the heavy lifting on this, if you go to the next slide, Jeff, project overview, really happened. Technically, this thing began back in May 2017 when you had a big workshop to generate a lot of brainstorming kind of ideas. We came into the picture a little bit closer to the end of 2017, and most of this work was done during the calendar year of 2018. But a couple of big steps that I think came of this from the different exercises and phases of the reporting and study. We identified 10 topics that we really wanted to get into. Regionalism, it's already been said today, actually, in your meeting, is a big and important topic, and it's wide-ranging, and it's a little scary, and it's hard to always get common definitions of it. So that was an important part of this. And once we had the topics in place, we actually culled a list of 26 candidate metropolitan planning organizations around the country. Our focus was on 3 core MPOs, Hillsborough, Pasco, and Fort Pinellas, and then we also touched on some of the ones around it, the so-called shell MPOs, but we acknowledge very early on that every region, including this one, is really quite different from each other. Ironically, I'm talking to you now from the North Carolina MPO conference, and every MPO here at this conference in North Carolina, the ones that join from out of state, are all quite different. So we really try to learn lessons that address very specifically the topics, not necessarily that we're alignment with every context, variable of every MPO. By October 2018, we had our recommendations at a pretty high level. We enjoined people to participate in a workshop in October that I'll go into a little bit more detail. And then, obviously, just today, the report is at this point received some comments and has been finalized. And we're trying to share that with you today. And I think, Mr. Chairman of the board, I think we're just looking at this as a accepting information kind of action for you. But if that's not true, I will stand
No, that's
corrected.
my understanding. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I think that's right. I don't think I heard it before. So next slide, Jeff, is highlights of the third workshop. And this is a good place, really, to summarize things. Because I think at the third workshop, and I'm going to the next slide, Jeff, walkthrough, it really kind of got into the meat of the matter. The first two workshops were very much kind of high level and a little more free flowing. We tried to both direct people in the first few parts of that workshop and then let people kind of have at us with a full group kind of plenary type session where it wasn't just us standing up there responding to questions. It was the directors of the 3 NPOs there in your region and a couple of others as well in Florida. And kudos to those directors of Broward and Metro Plan Orlando that joined us that day. I think people got a lot out of what they had to say. It was interesting for the participants. So the next slide kind of touches on some differences of the workshops. I won't dwell on this very much, but we did try to direct people a little bit more, but we also tried to keep it open at the end so that people that really had something to say that might have felt frustrated that they didn't have an opportunity to have a platform to talk about all the opinions. And there's a lot of opinions about this. Have that opportunity, and hopefully that worked a little bit. A little bit more detailed. And one thing we heard on the right-hand side of this slide, purpose and outcomes, is inclusiveness and trust. And we heard that many times. I think it's really important to keep in mind. There's a lot of temptation. I'm a technocrat. I know Jeff is too, to an extent, and some people in the audience probably are too, and on the board maybe. But it's really, at the end of the day, we're reminded over and over again it's about people and finding ways of making those ties with individuals and agencies and keeping that moving forward over time in lots of different ways. We tried to explore that a little bit in some of the recommendations. Next slide, Jeff, says 2 scenarios. So the breakout sessions at this workshop were really important. One was simply a consistent list of questions that people were given. And then this, on the screen now, the 2 scenarios were 2 totally hypothetical. We tried to make them somewhat relevant to the region where we could. And we asked people to sit around a round table with a facilitator and talk about questions. Each of these scenarios had 3 questions associated with them. Almost all the tables actually got through all the questions, but the dialogue was really important. We wanted to foster a dialogue. And it wasn't about solving the problem or building the project or whatever. It was really about, how is the structure of the multiple NPOs in this hypothetical region influencing those decisions or your ability to get to a decision. And I felt like, and some of you were participants, I hope, are there now, but I felt like the discussions were really nuanced. I mean, there was a lot going on in people's heads, and for the most part, people brought a lot to the table and were able to set aside some of the immediate concerns that always face us. And it was really an interesting thing. So focus on process concerns. That did happen, I think, in this exercise. A lot of the solutions, were inclusive of regional collaborative initiatives, and it was regardless of NPO structure. And one thing I've tried to say every time, maybe I forgot a few times, but there's already good things happening regionally in your region, the Tampa region. So it's more or less building on what you've got and continuing to move forward in that track, and that's what we try to do with some of the recommendations. The next slide, Jeff, shows a little bit of output from this. There's a very detailed record of comments from this workshop and the other 2, for that matter. I really encourage you, if you're interested in this topic, to go back through and do a quick scan, at least, of those. It's really interesting. But one of the things that, people talk about money all the time and obtaining funding. And this is where I just pulled this one out. There's other slides in here about the outcomes. But this one was interesting to me because it really did talk about, a singular NPO might be able to do something, but however, other people would say, no, actually, because you've got so many different governments and under different conditions and circumstances, it might actually be harder to get to a decision. So I think, again, the discussion was really clever and nuanced. People got it, and they understood it. And it was very useful for us as we were refining our recommendations. So that was good. I did mention that there was 10 questions, and Jeff, this is the 20 question slide with a little funny-looking piano key bar chart thing. We did get some more information about that. People actually generally, again, and you'll see kind of some differences here in the next slide, but supported a due structure that was, fair. There was some feeling, I think, that support for regional projects could happen cooperatively across county and MPO lines under certain conditions. Even support for an executive committee having a greater authority, again, conditionally. That was not uncommon. The next slide, Jeff, is white, some text and a couple of charts on a white background. These are just a couple of the answers, and these are good, again, because they kind of illustrate some of the nuances of the responses. So this question was a decision-making structure at the top here that focused on regionally significant projects more than the current structure may result in reduction in available federal funding for one or more locally significant projects. Under what, if any, conditions would that ever be acceptable? And, certainly not a huge, plurality, but, 57% suggested that it could be possible. But only 3% said it wouldn't be acceptable under any circumstances. So I think there is, some interest, a lot of interest. We hear a lot of comments that are at different times that we're very interested in this topic, and I think that illustrates you're willing to put your money where your mouth is. The next slide, Jeff, just bounce on here. Talk about recommendations, and that slide says development recommendations. The next slide talks about 3 MPO meetings we had. They were quite different. Hillsborough MPO called a special meeting. We presented to Pasco at a regular meeting for Pasco, and then Ford Pinellas actually included us on their agenda for a big kind of cross-cutting regional discussion. They were having a workshop they were having. So, but it was interesting. All 3 were productive, and all 3 a lot of good information exchanged at all 3, no matter what the venue was. So. The next slide, Jeff, is the 3 types of actions, which we tried to share pretty as early as we could in the process, late in 2018. And the ones in boxes are the ones in the orange and red boxes are the recommendations that move forward into the report at the end of the day. And so the next slide, Jeff, says implementation schedule, a 2-part approach. What we tried to do in this was these are specific recommendations in the report. There's more detail in the report. These are actually very accessible. So if you don't read anything else, I would certainly go through and read these few pages, because regardless of your feelings about additional regional support and behavior, how important it is to you now or later, I think some of these recommendations bubbled up from your staff and came from people internal to the process, as well as our suggestions from some external reviews. I won't go through all of these, but there's certainly support for enhancing the authority of an executive board, maintaining independent citizen advisory committees, but maybe also having one that addressed regional issues in some capacity. Direct coordination with state leadership was really important. And then developing a collective regional funding strategy, where we've seen this happen in other places. It's definitely you've got to cooperate to develop a regional funding strategy for yourselves for some of these bigger regional projects. So only after those short-term things are done, the graph kind of has a break there about the 2/3 mark. And then as we get closer to the 2030 census and redesignation period, which is important for MPOs, but we get into things like modifying voting structures and potential for having a single MPO policy board at that point. Part of the recommendation here was that right now there's still a lot of differences and variation and nuances, and there will be forever, but if the trends keep on the way they seem to be going now, we're very slowly moving in a direction where a lot more people are moving across these borders we have. So if that trend continues and you're successful with these and other short-term recommendations, the ones at the top, then yeah, I mean, I think it is perfectly reasonable that you might think about embarking on a stronger more select regional government. So for your transportation anyway. So we also talked a little bit, I don't need to leave this out because it was, again, coming from some of your staff. Maybe it's not just transportation. Maybe it's economic development. We already heard this morning that, economic development is really dependent upon, to a degree, regional competition and transportation. So there may be other elements like land use development and economics that are important to consider in any kind of more enhanced regional governance. The next slide, Jeff, was comments received on these draft recommendations. And we got comments from some of the MPOs and FDOT as well. Again, one of the things we heard a lot was there's a big focus on merger, although it was just one recommendation of many. There's certainly a lot of concerns voiced, particularly in Hillsborough there, and then I'd travel over to Pinellas and Pasco, and it was a really different discussion. And so it's very interesting to see where people's heads are at right now on this. But it is kind of moving and plastic, I think, as time goes on. The ability to move projects forward, that was a big concern. And so, we move projects forward faster, this wouldn't even really be an issue. But, how do you do that? How important is having enhanced regional authority or autonomy, either one, important to moving and financing projects? Other things, communications. I actually think, I've worked in a lot of different places, I think the region there is doing a pretty good job with communicating when they need to. I think maybe enhancing that a little bit more with maybe some offline communications when you don't have a burning need to do it. Maybe just quarterly, it might be a good idea. And then state relationships. A lot of our financing and policy is derived and trickles down from the state. So finding ways to continue to work with state relationships is going to be really important. That was one of the comments too. So that's it. The next slide, Jeff, is the last one. It says thank you, and that's my information. Jeff Kramer's in front of you. He is excellent. Whatever he doesn't know about MPOs is probably not worth knowing. So he's a great resource that you have there locally. I definitely encourage you to tap him or me with any follow-up questions. But I'll be quiet now and let other people say, offer their comments who are part of this process. I thank you for that, sincerely. And then if you have any questions, happy to try to hit those now, too.
Thank you, Scott, for that cogent report. Any questions for Scott or for Jeff while we've got them here? Any other comments? Yes, Commissioner Kent.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I just would like to make others aware of some of the issues in Hillsborough County with regards to this. I also think there is still apparently some sense, because we've had it voiced by some officials in the region, that that we're still under some kind of federal mandate in terms of merging. It was said at one of the last meetings. I think it's important for everybody to know that as I understand, and this started before I became a commissioner, the genesis of this was a federal effort, a directive under the Obama administration to merge MPOs. And the model, as I understand it, would have required the merger of MPOs, one single MPO from Boston to Richmond, Virginia, under what was there. Congress immediately, under the Trump administration, may surprise people, one of the most bipartisan things that I've heard going through overwhelmingly, and Congress both overwhelmingly voted to repeal the directive. It was signed by Trump. So there is no federal impetus which was in place when this was started. So that's, I think, the first thing to point out, make aware. The other, what I heard was that this is a strategy for somehow getting increased funding. But I think what I've heard in the workshops over and over again, and looking at the other MPO mergers, is in fact that hasn't happened. And right here it says, no clear conclusion about the relative effectiveness of any possible structures with regards to acquiring more dollars. I also understand historically in the last 40 years there's never been merger of any MPO anywhere in the country, although there have been divorces. And I just, here in Florida, we have 27 separate MPOs. The MPOs that are getting the most resources from the state, which is one of the things that they talked about here, are, as you would expect, the MPOs with the most population or the most legislative pull. There are separate MPOs in Miami-Dade and Broward, and they all get funded well or better than this area, anyone in this area, or their transit funding. The same is true in Orange County, where they've gotten their Sunrail funding from the state. I would love to see us get operational funding for an express bus system. I think that would be a great thing to work for, but I think this, I'm just saying that too, we had our meeting, as you alluded to, or what Mr. Lane alluded to, in Hillsborough County about the MPO, and I would just like to say that We had many people get up and speak. We had many written public comments. Every single one was negative with regards to this. And every comment made by our MPO members was negative in regards to this, and especially very strong. I know that you come here with some thing about revenue sharing, and I think in particular people were very strong that they would not want to do any kind of revenue sharing plan in the region, that they felt like in Hillsborough County, hopefully, that we have resources moving forward, and they're really anxious to deploy those. Also, I would just say too that there was, and one thing I've always looked at here, there is a real energy in Hillsborough County for conversion of the CSX tracks, which I've never quite understood any intimation that it wasn't a regional project, but and not under, in some way couldn't be defined. It seems like we have reached a single definition here for regional, which is interstate. And the interstate connections. But anyway, those are all things that I just wanted to point out about Hillsborough, about the study, and I thank you for the presentation and the information that you brought forward.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments? Okay, none being heard. Thank you guys for the presentation. Keep us advised, and we will proceed on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next order of business is the final lobbyist reports. What I would like to do here is get some feedback from Al Burns, who got the best offers, I think, from the different lobbying groups. Since there's been a little lag of time, I see that some of the representatives are out here today. I am going to, in an abundance of fairness, give them each a little time to recount and speak again on their behalf. And then we will open this up for discussions. But first, I'd like to get a clear picture of what the final and best offers were from all the firms, so we can go through them one by one.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Al Burns, Director of Procurement, PSTA. A little bit of background, again, for those that may have not seen those from the start. In November, TBARTA released an RFP for lobbying services. We received 6 proposals. As a result of that solicitation, we had evaluation committee members from TBARTA staff and Brian Miller Olive staff. We brought that to the January Finance Committee, where I was asked to bring the top 3 ranked firms to the full board. At the full board meeting in February, the top 3 ranked firms presented before the full board. After that, Chair Holton instructed me to go and get best and final offers. The results of the best and final offers are in your packet, but I'll go verbally. Ballot Partners, $510,000. Chambers Collin, $373,992, and Van Scoy, $384,000.
Now, one distinction there, that total numbers you're talking about from 500,000 to 373 are including the 2 option periods that are purely option periods.
Correct, sure, that's what the base is.
Tell us too what the base is as well.
The base price is $306 for Ballard, $216,000 for Chambers, and Van Scoy is $216,000 as well for the base years.
Commissioner Seal.
Could you remind me what the annual local contributions are? Because that's what's going to be funding this.
I do not have that information in front of me.
I think Debbie does.
To Debbie.
Currently, in fiscal year 2019, the local contributions total $300,000.
$300,000? And every county
Per county?
entity is contributing?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Kemp.
I have a few questions about the budget. In terms of our discretionary budget that is not allocated to PD&E or our van pool, or that could be used for lobbying purposes. How much is that?
That's your total local contributions of the $300,000. Included in that is your lobbying services for the state. Any items that would not be eligible under grant, which may be time off of work, vacation time, et cetera, that would not be grant eligible. We also have $200,000 coming up on the RTDP that requires a local contribution. I was actually going to talk a little bit about that later, that we'll be looking for an increase in local contributions, given all of the needs.
So I maybe have these, I'm a little confused here, because it sounds like we're over, if we count our state lobbying, which I recall as 75,000 or so a year.
It's about $7,500 a month.
So that we would be we're looking at being in the red on this budget. We're over 100% if we were to approve one of these, but we're also in a very precarious position. For instance, if one of the members didn't decide to withdraw and not pay lobbying fees or whatever, how does that affect the budget?
Actually, it doesn't have any effect on the budget for fiscal 19 because we didn't start the state lobbyist until well into the fiscal year, as well as we're already halfway through the year so far with the federal. So we would be well within budget for this fiscal year. Looking forward, we have to take into consideration all of what you just said.
So, and it looks like it looks like of our discretionary funds, we're spending like more than 100% on lobbying. Is that accurate?
No, that would not be true. Depending on the way the board goes today, you have to remember the number that you're looking at represents 5 years.
5 years, not 3.
5 years.
Yeah, I want to emphasize to everyone, there's been some misconception of numbers thrown around. These numbers were never on a one-year basis. They were on a three-year mandatory basis, then 2 options. And when you really compare them, you know, there's the highest and the lowest on the 3 years is $90,000 a point, total over 3 years, which is $30,000 a year. And then it's about $27,000 a year difference in the range on a 5-year contract. So we're not, in reality, talking about gargantuan leaps of higher prices here.
So next year, if we approve this, what percentage of our discretionary budget will be spent on lobbying?
Well, I'm going to be looking for an increase to $550,000 to cover both the RTDP, your lobbying services, as well as other, sundry expenses.
And so this part would be what percent of that?
It'll be less than 50%.
Okay, and this is all coming from ad valorem property taxes in the respective counties that are Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough.
I can't say where the individual counties' funds are coming.
But countywide property tax or revenue. Okay, thank you.
Is there another question, Commissioner Long?
I didn't have a question, Mr. Chair, other than to point out that it might be advantageous for other members of the board that aren't on finance or policy to hear our financial report and our legislative report first before we take up this action item, because it might help to clarify for our board members where we are and where we hope to be a few days from now.
I have no objections to that. If we can, Debbie, you can just give us that report quickly, and we'll take that out of order.
Well, I'd like to give the legislative report first, if it's all right with you, and then the finance.
Well, does the legislative report on the state level go germane to the issue of hiring the federal lobbyist?
It could, potentially.
In an abundance of caution, I'll rule in your favor.
Thank you. So I'd like to give you the latest and the greatest on the legislative report, since I just spoke about that. You may know that it has been an interesting ride through this legislative session, because our appropriation ask was for $1.5 million, and we wanted that to be recurring. At a point further after the legislature began, the appropriation line item went up to $4.8 million. It closed out from conference at 2.5. And the reason for that is because the appropriation chair, Senator Hudson, wanted a lot of the individual asks from around our region to flow through TBARTA. It was a bit of a strategy to ensure that TBARTA in its new iteration became and will be relevant to the region. And so right now, we are very comfortably sitting at 2.5 million. In the proviso language that goes along with that appropriation, there are some specific requirements of us as the board. And $1.5 million of that $1 million of that is set aside for funding, planning of projects that will involve different types of technology. That will be for us to determine and our staff to determine going forward, along with our partnership with FDOT, what is the best and most appropriate use going forward in terms of moving real solutions in our region. Secondly, the rest of the money that we had asked for, $1.5 million, that we wanted to be recurring revenue, the legislature for this year has made that a one-time ask, and it is not recurring. Their mindset is that given where we've been for more than a decade, they are anxious to see under this new leadership, both with David and the newer members of the board, how we will move forward and how we will really begin to make a difference in this region. The current president of the Senate and the House and the future folks that are poised to come in are very, very focused on wanting to see action and not just dozens of binders of studies like we've done in the past. And so they will require that we come back again next year and have our appropriation ask at that time, depending on how Debbie continues to monitor our budget and the fiscal place that we are in. So I feel very confident that we are, for the first time in a very, very long time in our region, moving the ball, which has been no easy task, as you know. So again, those numbers have all now been bumped up to the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House, and our folks in Tallahassee that have been advocating for us are very confident that we have the support of the leadership and those dollars will hold. So that's very, very exciting. The reason I wanted to share this information with you earlier rather than later is because as soon as session is over and the governor completes the veto process, we are going to have to immediately start again on our legislative strategy for next year, because remember, we're moving on up to reapportionment, and the legislature will meet earlier. And so this time next year, the legislature will already be done. The process even for the gubernatorial vetoes will have taken place, and we will be off and running. So we've got a lot of work to do legislatively for the next 6, 7, 8, 9, next year, starting almost immediately when session ends. That's the end of my legislative report for today, but it's very positive. We're moving in the right direction. I couldn't be more thrilled. Okay, so now for the finance piece that I'm sure we all are very interested in. We had a very robust and thoughtful Finance Committee meeting last Friday, and Al can speak more thoroughly to the action item that we covered as it related to a 3-year, $5 million contract to conduct the project development and environmental study for a rapid transit system running 41 miles of the I-275 corridor between downtown St. Petersburg and Wesley Chapel. We're finally going to get this done, right, Mr. Secretary? Yes, he's shaking his head. Yes. Okay. And then we had the most exciting part of the meeting when Debbie Lales presented the financial statements. TBARTA has $146,000 in the bank, with $100,000 being an advance from FDOT, Mr. Secretary's positive influence on our board. Thank you very much. For the RTDP, the year-to-date net income is $84.6,000. Included in the net income for TBARTA, are you ready? Remember where it was last year? We have $1.05 of interest income. How fabulous is that, right? So now for the members that are here from other counties and representing your county commissions, Debbie has proposed going into fiscal year 2020 local funds contributions that will take us to $200,000 in a local match to FDOT for the RTDP. The lobbyist, as contractual obligations in TBARTA, is seeking to build a 1-month operating reserve of $200,000 with a goal of achieving $100,000 in fiscal year 2020, which gives us a 15-day reserve. So each of your counties, do you have that for us today, Debbie? The individual contribution that we're asking our county commissions to approve?
I have it with me, and we can send it out. And I don't know if it's in the packet.
Okay, so once we approve this today, my report, you'll all be getting your request from David about what our respectful request is of our partners that are in the region. I have the number for you, Commissioner Seal, just don't have it in my head at the moment, but I've already sent it.
Is it increasing then?
Yes, it is increasing.
Wow. Kind of like to know what it is.
It's about a 20% increase, correct, Debbie? Oh, look at this. Here's my sheet right here. Okay, so the Hernando contribution for this year has been $16,164.91. Their county population estimate is $186,553. Their proportion of the total dollars is 5.37%. The contributions for fiscal 2020, we're asking for $29,509.64. That's for the Hernando folks. Commissioner Kemp, for the Hillsborough folks, the contribution for fiscal year 2019 is $120,970. Your county population estimate is 1,408,566. The proportion of total that we are asking from Hillsborough is 40.51%, or $222,812.19. Manatee. The contribution for fiscal year 2019 is $32,313.09. The county population estimates are 385,571. Your proportion of total dollars to TBARTA is 11.09%, and the contribution we are requesting for 2020 is $60,991.05. Commissioner Starkey, Pasco County's contribution this year is $44,647.19. The county population estimates for Pasco are 525,643. The proportion of total to TBARTA is 15.12%, or $83,148.16. Commissioner Seal, our contribution from Pinellas this year was $85,904.81. The county population estimate for us is 970,637, and the proportion of total dollars to TBARTA is 27.92%, or $153,538.96 increase. And that's the end of the report. Did you want to add, Debbie?
I just wanted to add in, the reason we brought this to the Finance Committee now is we know all of you are working or starting to work on your budgets for next fiscal year. So it's good to have this in front of you. TBARTA will be reaching out to each of the counties if you want us to present at your county commission so that you can get an idea of what this is all about. It is population-based, so it's a fair analysis.
Thank you. And I have asked David to please send an individual memo to all of your county administrators and commissioners so that they have the information as well. Any questions? Debbie? Yeah.
So moving on to the state lobbyist, fully funded for a year is how much?
I want to say it's $7,500 a month, I believe.
$7,500 a month?
It's 90,000.
90? Okay. So basically, the ask is because you're trying to increase the reserve for cash flow to a month. So our decision today to pick a federal lobbyist is not causing the increase?
No.
We could cover it under our current allocation. That's what I just wanted to be sure of.
Debbie?
Under our current allocation of the $300,000, we could accommodate both the state and the federal lobbyists. What it doesn't accommodate is a local match for the RTDP.
Match for what?
The RTDP, the Regional Transit Development Plan. And then the other piece would be, again, to try to build our reserves. FDOT has been an excellent partner with us, allowing us to do alternative payments. As you heard, we have $100,000 in the bank as a sort of a little kitty to get us going with the RTDP, but it'd be nice to take that pressure off of the district.
And how much is that match?
And that would be, it's $200,000.
I'm sorry?
$200,000.
200.
Commissioners, Kemp.
Well, Commissioner Kemp, yeah. You give me your report. So
Here, okay. I know when the policy or legislative committee was looking to do an endorsement of a dedicated interstate lane as part of what they wanted this organization to move forward, and that was advised that it really wasn't what we should be doing, as they're doing an alternative analysis, and it would be the wrong thing for us to do in terms of the fact that we were the sponsoring organization for the research. So I am not understanding. I understand why we would have a state lobbyist and to try to get state resources. I don't understand it this time. I think it, to me, would seem premature that we're not there yet with anything to really bring or work for in terms of a federal presence. So I just would...
Well, let me respond to that too. And part and parcel of, since this inception of TBARTA, an integral part of that was the federal funding component piece, you know, to get this project done. And that was the way the study was originally set up, and that was the intention all along. And adding on to that is there is an opportunity now, because of the administration's push towards infrastructure and potential infrastructure bills in the next 2 years, that there are very, very unique opportunities for extra pots of money even outside of an FDA grant process. So integral to our entire system was the notion of the federal component of that. And it is certainly not too soon to start getting those things done because they take time.
Do we have a model for where the operating funds would come from? What's the idea on that?
If I could, Mr. Chair, one other reason why it's so timely for us to be taking this up today on the federal level is because for any of us that have, and I know Commissioner Seal has, and so has Commissioner Starkey, for any of us that have actually gone to Washington and lobbied for transportation funding, it is an incredibly complicated process to get into the federal pipeline. And there is a window of about 5 years that you've got to be able to enter that pipeline and go through those different steps before you can actually get the money. And maybe Mr. Secretary, can you add on to that? Because we work in partnership with state as well, so.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't really comment on the lobbying side.
No, but the process.
But yeah, certainly the process is at times complicated and takes a while. You have to go through various steps to get to, the finish line. So yeah, it can take quite a while.
And historically, other agencies around the country that do exactly what we're purporting to do all deploy federal lobbyists. So it's kind of a given, and you've got, again, a lot of lag time in there that you've got to start laying the groundwork.
I am familiar with and I have been to Washington to lobby on transportation projects and familiar with the process. But I still think without a plan, without a plan for operating and still in design, it's still premature, especially considering the budget challenges that TBARTA is facing. While I agree that the state, looking at the state possibilities right now could yield fruit, I don't see where, I just can't see where those projects are in a development phase yet that would merit looking for funding outside.
As we go through with the PD&E, and we pretty well, that'll define within certain parameters, but that's kind of the project we selected. That's why we're choosing the PD&E, and that's why we kind of need to work hand in hand with all levels of government to get that effectuated, because you don't want to have a plan out there like this board has done before for many years and then just sit and languish and not get funded. And I think that was the impetus of TBARTA being created by the legislature. It's what the legislature wants us to do and to move forward, and again to underscore Commissioner's comments about the legislative process. Everyone I talked to up there is thoroughly happy with TBARTA. They want to see it move forward. They are even throwing us additional projects to look at. So we have the ball, we have to run with it now. We cannot just sit back and wait and wait and wait.
We have momentum, and we're working with other regions so that each of our regions that are part of TBARTA stand to, be much more enhanced with transportation funding that they don't currently have. And one of the reasons we're in such a great position financially right now compared to where we have been is because Debbie knows where all those pots of money are that can help us match our state dollars as well. And that's a big part of what goes for transportation. Eventually, we know we're going to need those federal funds, and we can't wait until we need them to apply because they'll pass us by for someone else that's already positioned themselves to receive the money.
I'll just for the record, I'm going to have to leave for a induction for the Women's Hall of Fame, but so I won't be here, but I know we have a quorum, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So there won't be any questions. So anyway, I just want to let that be known because I'll have to leave. Thank you.
Thank you for those good comments, too. You hit the nail on the head with the trend towards MPOs, I think, and you've seen a major shift in national policy on that.
Yes.
Congratulations, by the way, Commissioner.
Oh, I'm not getting it.
Oh,
I'm just being the awarder.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Any other questions for Commissioner Long on the finance report, or for Debbie? None being heard, I will recognize Al again to recount the best offers, finish up on that, and then give the various groups an opportunity to summarize or make comments as they see fit.
Just to make sure that it is clear for the board, and I apologize for earlier, the base price, the BAFO base prices for ballot partners is $306,000 for a total contract price of $510,000. That includes both option years. Chambers, $216,000 for the base, and a total of $373,992 for all 5 years. Vanscoy, $216,000, and a total of $384,000 for the base and all 5 years. At this time, I'm just going to go in alphabetical order, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair, and I think you said a minute and a half or 2 minutes?
I didn't give any specific time. I think a reasonable amount of time for the transparency and edification of the whole board will do it. Just be reasonable, and I'll exercise discretion as need be.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So with that, I'll introduce ballot partners.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Hold this a little closer. My name is Todd Josko. I'm a partner in the Tampa Bay office of Ballard Partners. Appreciate the opportunity to not only speak, but also to ask for your business today. It seems like things are going in the right direction with TBARTA. I'm really excited to hear that as a resident of Tampa. As Commissioner Long said, that things look great in the legislature, and I think that really illustrates the need to have the right team in place because the stakes are high. We feel that Ballard Partners is that team. Much has been made about our relationships with the Trump administration. We're proud of that. We have had many partners in our firm that have played a really important role in helping the president get elected and have really great relationships at the executive level. We have the ability to dialogue directly with the president, with the vice president, with Secretary of Transportation. But don't believe that we are not a bipartisan firm just because of the strength of our relationships with the president. That dominates the narrative because he's the president. If Hillary Clinton would have won, I think the narrative would have been about our partners that have great relationships in the Clinton administration or with the Democratic Party, our partner Jamie Rubin, who was the Assistant Secretary of State under the Clinton administration, or Florida Congressman Robert Wexler. So we're very much a bipartisan firm. It's our job to have those relationships with the people who are making decisions. And what that means for you is, let's remember that any of the Catalyst project's needs are dependent upon interstates that can move these vehicles, whether they're rubber tire solutions or what have you. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done at the federal level with the the United States Department of Transportation or the Florida Federal Highway Administration in getting these interstate modifications done that we need. We're uniquely positioned to really help move that needle. And that's really important for TBARTA because nothing really happens unless we have the roadway capacity to allow for these technologies. And we're definitely, I think, because of our unique relationships, the firm that can really get those things done. Two quick things I wanted to just add that came up before. We talked about transit experience and transit appropriations in particularly. We've had a 25-year track record in the state of Florida for excellence when it comes to appropriations. In the last 3 legislative sessions alone, we've garnered over $100 million for clients in state appropriations. There's not another firm that comes second to that. And we've done that because we believe that we're really good at what we do, but also it's a strategic decision to really not put all of our eggs in one basket when it comes to appropriations. You can't say that, well, we specialize in this, because at some point you're competing against yourself for those appropriations. So we've had a very successful track record of allocating our time to specific silos of appropriations buckets and being strategic in terms of not going all in on one sector, to spread ourselves out so that we're really effective. And I think that that's going to play to your advantage when it comes to federal appropriations as well too. We appreciate the opportunity to have your consideration. Really think that we're the best firm for TBARTA. And just to sum up, Commissioner Long brought up the allocations that come from the different counties. It's a responsibility that we're really well aware of when we deal with public entities, that these are the people's money, and you have to make good investments. And I think that these are big asks, and you're asking your taxpayers for this money, and you want to get it right. And I truly believe that we are the best firm that offers the best return for those hard-earned tax dollars, and appreciate your consideration this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Any questions for Todd? Thank you.
Thank you.
Al?
This time I'd like to ask Chambers to call.
Thank you. I'm Mara Stargall-Kalon. I'm with Chambers, Collin, and Hartwell. Unfortunately, our partner, Katie Cashel, our lead partner, couldn't be here today, but she sends her regards, and we really enjoyed being able to present to you guys earlier this year. We believe we provided really great value with 2 partners and 2 senior associates on the team, all of which have extensive federal transportation policy and appropriations experience. In particular, we have worked with a lot of other transit agencies, big and small, regional and, just in a municipal area, or within a city. So, we understand kind of the challenges of bringing together various regions to kind of come to a consensus, move forward on projects, and support also all the individual projects of your members. We really do focus on transportation, and we think that's an asset. However, we do work on other issues outside of that, and so we are nimble. We are able to, work to the different areas, whether it is outside transportation or, we were talking about economic development. But one thing that we know intimately are the different grant opportunities. And I know Commissioner Kemp brought up concern about having a federal lobbyist right now. You don't have a specific project that you're pursuing quite yet, or pushing through the pipeline quite yet. However, there are also planning grants, for example. There is money available to help you right now, as well as in the future. And I think that we're situated in a position where we could really help you not only identify those, but then go after them and make sure that your delegation is on board. So I just want to be brief on that, and thank you guys again for the opportunity to present to you guys, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much.
And the last firm, Vance Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Harry Glenn with Van Scoyk Associates, and my colleague Steve Palmer with Van Scoyk Associates. We're both vice presidents of the firm. It was great to be with you in February. Steve he had a travel plan, couldn't be with you in February, so I'm going to yield most of my time to Steve so you get to meet him. Just want to say briefly that as we recounted in February, Steve and I bring a great team to potentially to work with TBARTA. I know Florida well, I know this region well. I've worked on a regional basis with most of all the counties that are in your TBARTA coverage area. We know the Florida delegation well. We're a bipartisan firm, so we know how to get things done for Florida. Steve has more than 30 years of experience in the transportation sphere. He's worked with transit agencies, rail, BRT projects, the whole gamut of transit projects. He understands, as Commissioner Long talked about, the complicated projects, the process that you have to go through with the FTA and the U.S. Department of Transportation. He's navigated these halls of the U.S. DOT and FTA for probably 20 years now. He served at U.S. DOT as Assistant Secretary of Congressional Affairs, so he knows the process. We'd love to work with you. We understand the cost situation that you're in. We've come down in our price twice now to try and reflect the fiscal situation that you're in. We do think it's an important time for you to start to engage in the process. As Chairman, you talked about, Congress is engaged in a conversation now about infrastructure. The highway and transit bill comes up for reauthorization in the next 18 months. This is the time for you to be involved. But more importantly, as we talked to TBARTA about back in our meeting in December, we need to start telling your story before Congress about who is TBARTA? Why are you unique? What are you bringing to the Tampa Bay area that hasn't been here before? And why do you need this support from the federal government for this major 41-mile project that will be groundbreaking for this area? So we'd love to work with you. We understand your fiscal constraints. We try to be responsible in that regard. I'm a Clearwater resident. I'm here all the time. I look forward to working with the board. Steve knows Washington. I'm going to talk a little bit about his background.
Thank you, Harry. I'll just start by saying you don't have to be 6'5" or taller to work at Dance Mr. Chairman and members of the board, thank you. I'm sorry that I was not at the last meeting, but just let me give you a quick background. Harry's touched on a couple different things and what I would bring to TBARTA. And let me start by saying, Mr. Chairman, we very much want to work with you, and we hope we can ask for your support in winning this contract. Because I think we bring not only the Florida experience that Harry brings, but the transit experience that I bring. My background very quickly. I've been at the firm 20 years. I represent a number of different transit agencies. I've helped 3 transit agencies get bus rapid transit grant agreements from the Federal Transit Administration. I work very closely with Jane Williams, the FTA acting administrator, as well as Nicole Nason, the new Federal Highway Administrator. And I've also done work for county highway organizations, securing $128 million for the San Bernardino County for interstate expansion several years ago. So both highway transit experience is the kind of experience that we will bring to TBARTA for you. I've also worked on the New Starts grant agreements for Dallas, for Washington, the Dulles extension for Los Angeles County. So we bring a vast amount of experience, not only working with the career level, which you need to do to get through that first stages in the pipeline. That's not a political process, despite what you might want to think about this. It's a process where they measure you on mobility, environmental, congestion, air quality, financial contribution. All of those things are things we will work with you on to get to those points. And then you need the political support to be able to get there. And that's something that we have as well, because I work on all my transit projects. We've done this with PSDA as well, taking them into the White House Budget Office so they know what the projects are and they know what's coming at them. And so they know that these are good projects, well-founded and supported by the local constituents. My background before I came to Vance Gregg Associates, I was Assistant Secretary at DOT, Head of Congressional Affairs, where I was the lead strategist and negotiator for the Secretary of Transportation. Worked with the White House, worked with FDA, worked with all the different modes of transportation while I was there for 5 years. I was also a Senate staffer, staff director of 2 subcommittees in the Senate for 10 years. So I bring a lot of Washington experience, still work very closely with DOT, and I should also say the House and Senate Appropriations Committees. And Mr. Chairman, you're exactly right. If there is an infrastructure bill this year, Peter DeFazio, who's now the chair of the House Transportation Committee, is going to write that bill for the House. And he's somebody that I've worked with for probably the last 10 years. So it's going to be a bipartisan effort. You're going to need a firm that's on the ground, and you're going to need a firm with the Florida experience as well as the transportation experience, and I think we bring that forward.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
The 3 firms that presented like you asked, Mr. Chair, and I'll wait your comments.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks all of you for presenting a brief synopsis again and again. I think we have a hard choice between 3 incredibly great firms, and I'm very happy and appreciative that they all adjusted their numbers somewhat to bring more in tune with our financial issues and constraints. But when looking at the numbers themselves, there's not that huge a variance that would totally be compelling one way or the other to say that finances should be the only determination in this consideration. So I think we really have to look to a totality of circumstances in evaluating who is best for TBARTA, what the best fit is. And to that end, again, I think it's best to kind of open this up to discussion before we entertain any kind of motions or anything of that nature. So let's briefly go around the room and like we did before and have a general impression, synopsis, issues, and so forth. And Mayor Kreisman will start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would agree. I think we have 3 very strong candidates. I took a lot of notes in the first meeting, asked a number of questions in the first meeting. I look at the rankings, and obviously there have been adjustments made with best and final. As you indicated, there's really a $30,000 per year difference, I think, between the most expensive and the least expensive And so to me, it really comes down to who's going to serve us best. We are a transit agency, and so all I care about is what kind of success our lobbyists have had when it comes to transit. And, I look at the history, I will say, Ballard has great success in Florida. As was mentioned, 25-year track record and approach in Florida, but their presence in Washington didn't start until 2017. And their transportation chops, so to speak, in Washington, I don't think are nearly as strong as Conlin or Van Scoyoc. I'm very impressed with both of those two entities from the relationships that they've built over the years, the fact that they are so focused on transit. And that's really all I care about is what's your success on transit. One of the things that struck me in our first set of presentations, and I made a specific note about this, was the one thing Van Scoyoc did that I didn't hear as much from the other two presenters was really talk about what their approach was going to be and focusing on what our needs are. They seem to pay a lot of attention to that. And that says they kind of really understand what it is we're trying to accomplish. And maybe that's why the committee ranked them number one and Conlin number two, I don't know. But from my perspective, I continue, I would agree with that committee's rankings. I also think given the makeup of Congress, and really that's who's going to make the decisions, it isn't so much just being able to call the president up. You got to get this through Congress. And that you've got a House that's Democratic, a Senate that's Republican, and an entity that is basically split 50-50. As far as the makeup of their lobbyists, I think it positions them really well to be strong advocates on our behalf. And so my support at this point in time would be to award it to Van Scoyoc.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would echo much as what has been said by the mayor. What I find interesting is last meeting we spent so much time on the price component, and that was what was the sticking point, and we had staff rank the companies, the applicants, but it was price that derailed the entire vote last meeting. And here we have come to the place where that's been relegated to not the highest consideration. We think we can do that fiscally. I would agree with the staff recommendation, given the bipartisan challenges that we have in Washington. We have a 5-year, I think it's been said, window sometimes for a lot of these things. I think we have to have someone who has the expertise, not just to get us in the pipeline, but to get that ultimate award. We don't know what 5 years from now is going to look like. And so at this point, I would agree with staff recommendation, although I do see this year and next year, certainly Ballard would be able to help us get very much along the game. So the price component being funded out of local dollars has been mentioned as a concern. Done well, regionalism is localism at a higher level. And I think that each county can go back to their respective boards and make that case that in order to make sure that their local voice is actually heard in Washington, that's the whole beauty behind a willful compartmentalized organization, regional organization like TBARTA, as opposed to a forced compartmentalization. And I think having this initiative with a federal lobbyist is important strategically to TBARTA and to the region going forward. So I'm happy about this recommendation. Thank you.
My turn? Oh, thank you. I won't wax on because I totally agree with the recommendations from the first two board members that have spoken. I think they were very, very articulate. I too am sitting here as a very focused member on transit. And while I recognize that we have real quality applicants, and each of them in their very own way are very unique, my focus today is on ensuring that we get into that federal process. And at this moment where we are, it is the process that is driving the train for me. And I am very comfortable knowing in my heart that Van Scoyoc are the right folks for TBARTA at this point in our fledgling history, because never before have we been so beautifully poised to do magnificent things for our region. We are truly moving the ball, and because of Commissioner Seal's longevity on our county commission, she knows up close and personal how hard it is and how long it takes. She has a real life living example in the work that she has been able to get done on Highway 19. And for all of us that care about the region, we love you for your persistence and determination and stick-to-itiveness, and I think that's what we need to do. And I'm also very aware that we are under the spotlight, and for the first time, I think our state DOT folks can really say that TBARTA is no longer a black eye for the state, right? Yay! We're moving forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Long, and thank you, Commissioner Seal, for all your help on all the transportation in Pinellas County. I don't disagree with the point that we are under the spotlight. I think we definitely are under the spotlight, but that is a good thing in a way, because there are high expectations for this board. When the governor charged me as being chair, he said, do something bold, get it done. You guys have languished for many, many years, done studies after studies, cost the taxpayers thousands of dollars, and these studies go in files. Now, I think every firm that presented here is very capable of starting the process with the FTA, getting that done at the mid-level. What to me is going to make the quintessential difference here is going above that level to the highest levels of government, in the legislature, in the president's office, in the secretary's office, and making those connectivities and getting something done in a really quick manner. Regardless of who we are or where we are in politics now, we have to say this president has changed the tone and the nature of the way business is done in Washington. And that said, I think that the Ballard Group, because of their special connectivity with the administration, with the executive offices in the administration, and their immense connectivity on the Hill, gives them an added advantage. Now, while they might be marginally more expensive, I think we've seen today that we can afford that. My strong recommendation would be that let's give Ballard a chance to get done and deliver. This is a 3-year contract. This is not a contract for perpetuity. You know, if there's no deliverables after that, then you change. But I think we have to go for that extra punch now to get what we can, because all of us here, we're the inaugural board. We need to leave a legacy. We want to make Tampa Bay shine, and it's our time to shine now. Orlando's had their day in the sun. Miami's had their day in the sun. The state legislature, Washington, the citizens of this community, their eyes are on us right now to deliver for the folks out there that wait 2 hours on Howard Franklin Bridge, or can't get to Wesley Chapel, or even in Pinellas County, Janet and Karen, wait in traffic getting to a game or something. So given all that, and given all I've heard, let's take the shot. Let's be bold. Let's take a chance to really go for this. And my thinking is people to go with as ballot partners, to give them that chance. That's my thoughts.
From my perspective, local, state, and federal dollars are the only way transit can be implemented. We need the resources and the dollars from all three components to be working together. Technically, I've felt from the initial presentations and the information that I've received that Van Scoy, I think, provides the more technical, in the trenches, nuts and bolts type approach to working with Washington. While I understand the chair's political thoughts related to the Trump administration and how different it is up there today, there's still a lot of work in the trenches that has to be done in order to get to that trough for it to be funded. And that long-term relationship that they have with the departments that actually funnel this money to these types of projects, I think is very important. I saw that in their presentation again today, and I see it in their background. I would have a tendency to support Van Scoy. I never have really taken the dollars as a major part of my consideration. I know it's there, and I appreciate the best and final offers that have been provided, but I believe technically Van Scoy is the best decision for us to make.
Well, let me just start with saying thank you to the three firms that presented today. I think all three of you are well capable of supporting this organization. And I do want to also recognize one of our commissioners stating that I do believe this is needed at this time. I do believe we need this kind of capability and support to move our organization forward and help this region out with their transportation needs. I do believe we are also at an inflection period, both within TBARTA and the region when it comes to transportation. And with that said, as I do on HART, I always say we need to think out of that box. And we need to bring what I would call the best capability we can for the time we're in. Price has never been an issue of mine. I realized from the very beginning this was a 5-year contract, a 3-year base, 2-year option period, and so that would be, of course, nominalized over the years. With that said, I mentioned all three of them are very capable, but I think, as the chairman mentioned, this requires a bold play, I think, for us. It will get us out of that trench, as you mentioned. It will put us on the map and quite possibly move us forward very quickly. In that regards, then I would look at Ballard Partners to pull us through that critical period of time. As we mentioned, this is a 3-year base, and option periods are just that, option periods. And if something doesn't work out, or if politics change a little bit, then that can also change. But right now, I do believe we need to step forward, make a different bold play for the community, and see what happens from there. So.
Karen.
Well, thank you. As I'd like to also extend my thank yous to all three firms as well. You all did an excellent presentation, and we're very fortunate that there's such great lobbyists available to us to pick from. So I guess I've had some experience with Ballard, and of course I've had 20 years of experience with Harry Glenn, having served on the county commission that long. And that being said, those long-term relationships in DC that transcend the politics and transcends the people is what's important. You know, and that's what Van Scoy brings to the table. They have had a great history in bipartisanship, which was mentioned already by some of the fellow board members, that's going to be critically important when we go for the final appropriations from Congress and approvals. And so I strongly support Van Scoy and can just give testimony that they've brought the bacon home for many a year. And that's why we have a lot of good projects that have happened in Pinellas County.
Well, I too want to thank the three firms for your wonderful presentations. I think they're all quality firms, but for the same reasons that most of my board members have picked Van Scoy, I would echo that choice. However, I would say, as we're working now in the trenches, it may come to a time when maybe we need just a little more political muscle to help us get to the finish line. And so I would say let's not close the door on maybe bringing in someone in to help with the contracted firm, maybe we'll need two in that very last year to help us to get through. And I've seen other counties in the state of Florida doing that. So at this time, I'm very comfortable choosing Van Scoik, but hope maybe we can maybe work with Ballard later in the future as we get to the finish line.
Great idea.
Very educational from my standpoint. Last 30 to 45 days I've been in Tallahassee and in DC, and TBARTA has some momentum. In both DC and in Tallahassee, it came up. And it also came up that I was a board member. So it's a very educational opportunity for me here. What I think we need is individuals or a group that have the ability to get done what we're trying to get done as far as in transportation. And what I wrote down is what we need is an agency with transit experience. And based on what was recommended and obviously where the board is, where I am right now, I would go with Van Scoik also.
Okay. Any other further discussions?
I think Melanie Griffin might be on the phone.
Melanie?
I agreed with the chair and one of the other members about being in favor of Ballard and Partners for the reasons stated. I didn't have anything to add. The one thing I would say, though, from my perspective of being in person in February was that I did think that my number 2 would have been Chambers, and I did have concerns about the professionalism of some of the team members presenting from Van Scoik. So if I had to go to number 2, it would be Chambers, not Van Scoik. And that's all I had on that.
Okay, so we've heard from everyone. Any further discussions? Okay, none being heard, I will accept a motion from someone and we'll vote.
Move we retain Van Scoik.
Second.
It's been a motion, a second. Any further discussion?
Can we make it clear whether we're doing the 3-year or the 5-year?
For the 3-year.
Thank you.
With the 2 1-year options.
Yeah.
Right, so we'll bring it back to the board, though, to exercise that option, or are you giving the CEO the ability to exercise the option?
I'm happy to give it to the
I
CEO
think we can give it to the CEO. So
and in consultation with the board.
Yes. I think coming back to the board.
So your motion would be that the 2 1-year options would come back through the board?
Yes.
Okay. So there's been a motion, second. Any further discussion? All right, call the roll, please.
Jim Holton,
No.
Melanie Griffin,
I'm sorry. Can you repeat what we're voting on real fast? My son walked in the room. I got a little distracted. I'm so sorry.
The motion is to approve Van Scoik as to the lobbyists. It's been a motion, a second.
Thank you. My vote is no.
Wait, so you say yes?
Continue with the roll.
Cliff Manuel,
Yes.
Commissioner John Mitten,
Yes.
Commissioner Pat Kemp, out. Commissioner Reggie Bellamy,
yes.
Commissioner Catherine Starkey,
Yes.
Commissioner Karen Seal,
Yes.
Rich McLean,
No.
Commissioner Janet Long,
Yes.
Mayor Rick Kreisman,
Yes.
7 yeses, motion passes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jim. Our next item of business is the Policy Committee report. Melanie?
So the policy committee met last Friday. We had a very good meeting. We received updates on the website, and I don't see on the agenda where there'll be a presentation on that today. But generally, Michael Case and the other team members that are working on it gave us an overview of where they're headed with it to make sure the policy committee was on board, which we were. We didn't have any feedback or changes for them at this time. They'll continue to keep us abreast of their project progress. And then we also heard a preview of an expenditure policy that would require any staff member from TBARTA to submit receipts if they're seeking reimbursement for something work-related within 30 days of the expenditure. We did have from Vice Chair Cliff Manuel, there's agreement on the committee that there should be friendly language added to the proposed policy that if there is an exception for a reasonable reason that goes beyond the 30 days, there would be a appeal process for that team member to go ahead and have their receipt considered. And then that will come before the policy committee for an actual vote at its next meeting. And those were the major items discussed, unless staff or another team member wants to add something to that report.
Thank you, Melanie. Any questions for Melanie? Okay, none being heard. We'll move on finally to the chairman's report. I have nothing new to report today at this time. Thank everyone for their patience today.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Excuse me, don't we need to vote on the PD&E recommendation for award?
That should have happened under the finance committee, so that is unfinished business. So.
Yeah, well, I glanced over it, but I didn't really see.
Yeah, Al Burns, will you please give a synopsis of that?
Yes, Al Burns, Director of Procurement. This morning, Mr. Chair, I bring before you an action item, recommend approval of a 3-year contract to WSP Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $5 million. TBARTA, we went out to look for a firm for the project development and environmental study for the BRT project along the 41-mile corridor of the I-275 corridor between downtown St. Petersburg and Wesley Chapel. In February, TBARTA released a RFQ soliciting competitive proposals for that study. The RFQ complied with TBARTA's procurement policies that was posted on PSTA's and TBARTA's website along with Demand Star. As a result of the solicitation, we received one response, and that was from WSP. I'd like to highlight, even though we only received one response, and that was from WSP, they have 15 subcontractors on their team for this project. To name just a couple of them, AECom, Lochner, and Tyndall Oliver. They also have 4 small or disadvantaged businesses. They've committed to a 13% DBE goal for this project. Some of the DBE firms that they have is Kinetics Transportation Group and Tierra. The executive director wanted to make sure that the evaluation committee was very diverse. It was comprised of members from TBARTA, PSTA, Hart, Manatee County, Hernando County, Pasco County, and Florida Department of Transportation. The evaluation committee met in late March and ranked the proposal. Even though we received just one proposal, we still went through the formal evaluation process. After the evaluation, an oral presentation was given to the evaluation team. WSP brought some of their subs with them. For example, AECom, Info Strategies, represented by Mr. Jeff Booth. On April 4th, I requested WSP provide their hourly rates for each category or discipline that they plan to use for this. At that time, I compared their rates to the FDOT audited rates to make sure that the rates that they wanted for each engineering discipline was in line and fair and reasonable. After negotiations or discussions on the rates, I asked them for their level of effort per each discipline. At that time, they provided me their estimated hours for each task. And we held long discussions in regard to that to make sure that all the the hours associated with each task were in line or fair and reasonable. WSP and all the firms that they have as their subcontractors have the capacity to perform the work. And we've also checked their financials and them on SAMS.gov. The fiscal impact of the project will be funded by state grants and other sources as applicable. Once again, Mr. Chair, the recommendation is recommend approval of a 3-year contract to WSP USA Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $5 million. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Val, for that great report, and I think we have a group of rock stars here from based on the prime and the subs all involved in this. And I know there was some discussion at first that there was concern that more haven't bid it on, but it seems like every major firm in the country is taking a piece of this too, which is a great thing. So it's all wonderful, and I compliment you and your staff for great work in talking about this. Any other questions for Al?
Move approval.
Second.
It's been a motion, a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Al.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
As a board, do we need to accept the MPO Regional Coordination and Best Practices final report, just for the record?
No, I think they clarified today that they were just presenting that today, informationally.
Okay, just wanted to
We'll
make
have a
sure.
final report.
Thank you.
David, is that your understanding as well?
I was under the impression we might accept that today with a potential resolution of endorsement at next month's meeting, but if you prefer accepting it next month, we could approach it that way as well.
Yeah, he just said on the phone that it was his understanding he was giving information today, so I was taking
Okay.
his lead on that.
So we can come back next month
let's do that. It's a
and
formality,
request
correct.
that the board accept that final report.
Okay. All right, we'll do that next month then. Chair recognizes Bill Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The Citizens Advisory Committee met on April 17th at PSTA. We had a quorum. There were no action items on our agenda to consider, so we have no recommendations to pass on to you today. We were presented the TBARTA Regional Transit Development Plan, Envision 2030, and their public involvement plan. That was presented by staff of Tyndall Oliver. We look forward to playing a role in the outreach for the effort and in reviewing the baseline conditions phase of their project at our June meeting. Additionally, we had an update on the progress of the TBARTA website redesign, as well as an update on the Catalyst PD&E procurement that you just completed. We also heard about new staff changes and legislative session updates. We would like to thank HART for agreeing to provide us with personalized flamingo passes, which the committee will be using to document and report their experiences actually using transit for regional travel around Tampa Bay. Our next meeting will be on June 5th in this board meeting at HART. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions for Bill? Thank you. All right, our next, I guess, recognize Jeff Seward, Transit Management Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. Jeff Seward, Chief Financial Officer of HART and the Chairman of the Transit Management Committee. We had not met for a year due to organizational leadership changes in both of our organizations, but I'm happy to announce that we had our most recent meeting in March, and we had the opportunity to be briefed, as you will be in May, by the Tyndall Oliver team that is responsible for putting together the Regional Transit Development Plan. Now, why did that come to the TMC? Well, we have the opportunity as a TMC, as the committee within TBARTA that represents all of the transit agencies within the TBARTA region. As part of the RTDP team, Tyndale Oliver is looking for a technical advisory group, which would be made up of specifically those transit agencies that are part of the TMC, representatives from FDOT, and again, each of the transit agencies, with the goal of serving as our external review committee for the process, provide input during the process and development, help identifying early implementation projects, assist in getting the word out for public involvement, participate in the technical advisory group meetings, which will end up being our TMC meetings over this period of time of development, and review and provide input on reports. So I am very happy to report that the TMC is going to become a very tactical and technical committee moving forward. Something that we haven't had the ability to do for some time since the early days of working regionally on the Flamingo project. So I am looking very forward to chairing a committee that we're going to be doing something very tangible for the region. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. The chair recognizes David Green for the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You all have heard me report at a few meetings in the past about various positions that we were recruiting for, and I believe I reported at our last board meeting in February that I was preparing to extend offer letters for a couple of positions. Well, I'm happy to report this morning that we have 4 new team members, which I'd like to introduce to you all today. First of all, joining us in March was Melanie Williams as our senior accountant. Melanie, if you could wave to everybody, let them see who you are. Again, Melanie is our senior accountant. She comes to us with experience as an accounting manager. She's worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers and most recently has served as a controller and a CFO at Willem Accounting. Also joining us in March was Cindy Raskin as our Director of Commuter Services. Cindy comes to us with more than 20 years in the transit industry, most recently serving as Director of Marketing at PSTA. And then in April, we hired a couple of Chris's. First of all, Chris Jadek joined us as our Director of Communications. Chris comes to us with more than 20 years of media relations experience in corporate communications, broadcast journalism, and television news. And then Chris Dianuntis joined us earlier this week as our senior planner. Chris brings 30 years of experience to us in planning and transit. Chris has worked throughout the region, having served here at HART, at Cutter, at USF, with SCAT down in Sarasota, and most recently with PCPT in Pasco County. I'm very excited about the team that we've brought together so far. We have another position that is currently posted that went out on March 29th. We've received, and that is for a principal planner position. We've received some very solid resumes and interest for that position as well. We're currently completing phone screens, and we'll look forward to scheduling first interviews as soon as we can. So very excited about the team we're bringing together and the projects that we'll be working on over the next year. Speaking of projects, as you all know, we began the Regional Transit Development Plan recently. I reported in February, we held our kickoff meeting on February 6th, and we have been holding monthly team meetings thereafter. The project was branded as Envision 2030, and the purpose of that branding was to signify that this is more than just another plan, as we talked about a little while ago. This is a vision for what a truly regional transit system could look like in 10 years. As Jeff indicated, the TMC will serve as the technical advisory group, along with members of the career source organizations from throughout our region and members of FDOT Districts 1 and 7. We also agreed to add a member from the MPO staff directors to the TAG in order to allow for MPO representation. In terms of deliverables, we've completed the project management plan, and the public involvement plan was finalized and transmitted to both FDOT Districts 1 and 7 for their review and comment. We're currently clarifying some things for District 1, and we're currently awaiting their concurrence letters. Phase 1 of public outreach will begin in May with a meeting in each of the 5 counties. And we're drafting a survey that will also help us collect some feedback from the communities. That feedback and information from other TDPs completed from the transit companies will allow us to establish what our current situation is and for us to complete a baseline conditions report. And as was stated, Tyndale Oliver will be on our agenda for the May meeting and will update and provide an overview to the board at that time. Another project that Melanie mentioned during her policy committee report was the website redesign project. Chris Jadek, our communications director, has taken that project over as project manager. We are currently migrating content into what will appear on the new website platform. After we provide all that content to the supplier, FKQ, they will develop a preliminary design for review, and we are very excited, as I know you all are, to move that project forward and get the new website completed. I also reported in previous meetings about the FTA 5307 grant application. Our goal was to have that application submitted and have it approved by them by April 1st. I'm happy to report that we actually executed that grant on March 7th. And we have already worked with PSTA to start spending some federal funds down for TBARTA activities. Also related to FTA, we rescheduled our visit, which was originally scheduled back in January, but canceled due to the government shutdown, and we traveled to Atlanta on April 18th. That was a joint trip between myself and 3 members of PSTA. It was a very productive meeting. It allowed me to provide them an introduction of TBARTA and introduce them to some of the projects that we are working on. And interestingly, that was the first time that they had ever met anybody from TBARTA. So they were very pleased to learn where we are in our evolution and many of the initiatives that we're taking on. We also discussed the process involved for becoming a designated recipient. I've had some preliminary conversations with TBARTA staff and PSTA to make sure that we attain the appropriate capacity and training needed to comply with all federal requirements. Obviously, we will refine our plan over the coming months, but our ultimate goal is for TBARTA to become self-sufficient and fully compliant. Our fiscal year 2018 audit is underway with CLA. We've been providing information to them throughout the month of April. They will be on site at TBARTA for 2 weeks beginning Monday, April 29th for the fieldwork phase, and we expect them to be complete with their audit by the June 14th board meeting. And related to future board meetings, the May board meeting, again, we will be bringing a resolution to accept the MPO Regional Coordination and Best Practices final report. We will also be providing a presentation from Cindy Raskin on changes that are occurring within our commuter services department. We'll be providing the update for the Regional Transit Development Plan, and we also will reschedule the presentation which was on the February agenda from Brightline and Bob O'Malley. He was unable to join us today, but we're going to try to coordinate him returning in May to provide that update. One other future topic which I think would be beneficial for TBARTA's board is a presentation on the Cross Bay Ferry, since that is a regional transportation service for both Pinellas, St. Petersburg, Tampa, and Hillsborough, and the potential service to MacDill Air Force Base. So we're going to contact those folks and see if they'd be willing to come and do a presentation to the board as well. That's all I have to report.
Great, thank you.
Excellent.
Very good. So any new business to come before the board? Okay, thank everyone for today. Have a great weekend. I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Move adjourn.
Without objection, meeting adjourned.